Ruth Ellen Prescott stopped digging. The shovel fell from her bleeding hands. She looked at the tiny grave she'd made too small, too shallow, and her knees buckled into the frozen earth. Behind her, 6 children stood silent. The 7th lay wrapped in her shawl, cold and still. 5 months alone. 5 months of fighting. And now God had taken her baby girl, and Ruth had nothing left. Nothing but the sound of hooves coming through the storm. Subscribe now and follow this journey to the end. Comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels. Ruth's hands wouldn't stop bleeding. She noticed it, the way a person notices rain when they're already drowning dimly distantly, like it belonged to someone else. The blisters had torn open hours ago. The cold had numbed the pain. But the blood kept coming, smearing across the shovel handle, dripping onto the snow, staining everything red. "Mama," Elijah's voice, 13 years old and trying so hard to sound like a man. "Mama, let me finish." "No." "Mama," I said no. She drove the shovel down again. The frozen ground barely yielded. An inch, maybe 2. After 4 hours of digging, the grave was still too shallow. Not deep enough to keep the wolves out. Not deep enough for her baby girl. Grace had been 2 years old, 26 months if Ruth was counting. And Ruth had counted every single one. Every tooth that came in. Every word she learned. Every time she reached up with those chubby arms and said, "Mama, up." Now Grace lay wrapped in Ruth's wedding shawl, placed on the porch where the cold would keep her until the grave was ready. Like she was sleeping. Like she might wake up any moment and cry for milk. But she wasn't sleeping. And Ruth couldn't cry. She'd tried. Lord knows she'd tried. When she found Grace that morning, cold and still in the bed, they shared Ruth had opened her mouth to scream. Nothing came out. Just a sound like air escaping a punctured lung. A sound that wasn't human. "Mama, please." Elijah again. Closer now. His hand touched her shoulder and Ruth flinched like she'd been burned. "Don't. You're shaking." "I know. You've been digging for hours. I need to bury my daughter." Ruth's voice cracked on the last word. "I need to put her in the ground before the animals find her. I need to—" She stopped. The shovel slipped from her fingers. She stared at her hands, raw, bloody, barely recognizable, and something inside her chest began to collapse. "I can't," she whispered. "Elijah, I can't. The ground won't let me." "Then let me help." "You're a child." "I'm the man of this house now." Ruth looked at her son. Really looked at him. When had he gotten so tall? When had his jaw hardened into that stubborn line that reminded her so much of William? When had she started leaning on him like he was an adult instead of protecting him like he was her boy? "You shouldn't have to be," she said, "the man of the house. You shouldn't have to be anything but 13. Elijah picked up the shovel. His hands were smaller than hers, but stronger, steadier. "Papa's been gone 5 months, Mama. I've been the man of this house for a while now." Ruth wanted to argue, wanted to tell him to go inside with his brothers and sisters, to be warm, to be safe, to let her carry this burden alone like she'd carried everything else. But she was so tired. God help her, she was so tired. "The others," she managed. "Are they—" "Patience is watching them. The twins are scared, but she's keeping them calm. Mercy won't stop crying." Elijah's voice wavered for just a moment. "Ezra's cough is worse." Of course it was. Of course Ezra's cough was worse. Because nothing in Ruth Ellen Prescott's life could be simple. Nothing could be easy. She'd lost her husband to a broken back and a slow death. She'd lost her savings to doctors who couldn't save him. She'd lost her livestock to the hard winter, and now she'd lost her youngest child to a fever that came in the night and stole her away before dawn. What else could God take from her? What else was left? Mama. Ruth realized she was swaying. The world had gone gray at the edges, fuzzy and distant. Her knees felt like water. Mama, when did you eat last? She couldn't remember. Yesterday, the day before, she'd given her portion to the children so many times that hunger had become background noise easy to ignore. I'm fine. You're not fine. I'm fine, Elijah. Just dig. Please, just help me dig so she can. Ruth's voice broke. Really broke. The tears she'd been holding back all day finally came, and once they started, she couldn't stop them. She sank to her knees in the snow, right there beside the half-dug grave, and wept. Not quiet, dignified tears. These were ugly sounds, raw and animal, and torn from somewhere deep in her gut. The sounds of a mother who'd held her dead child in her arms and felt the last warmth leave that tiny body. Mama. Elijah dropped beside her, his arms wrapping around her shoulders. Mama, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. She was so small. Ruth could barely get the words out between sobs. She was so small and I couldn't. I tried to keep her warm. I gave her my blankets. I held her all night. I know. It wasn't enough. Nothing I do is ever enough. That's not true. We're going to die out here. The words came out flat, final. Ruth heard herself say them and knew they were true. All of us. We're going to die, and no one will even know. No one will come looking. No one cares about a widow with 7... She choked. 6 children. 6 children now. God took one, and He'll take the rest. He'll take all of us. Mama, don't talk like that. Why not? It's true. Ruth pulled back, looking at her son through tear-blurred eyes. I've done everything, Elijah. Everything a person can do. I sold the plow. I sold the good furniture. I sold your father's rifle, the only protection we had, just to buy medicine for Ezra. And none of it matters. None of it. Ruth Ellen Prescott. A new voice, sharp and cutting through the storm. Ruth's head snapped up. A figure stood at the edge of the property, a man on horseback barely visible through the swirling snow. She hadn't heard him approach. Hadn't heard anything over the sound of her own grief. Fear cut through the fog of exhaustion. A stranger. A man. Here where they had nothing left to steal and no way to defend themselves. Elijah, she whispered. Get inside. I'm not leaving you. Elijah, I said I'm not leaving you. The rider came closer. Ruth struggled to her feet, pushing Elijah behind her, putting herself between this stranger and her son. Her hands were shaking from cold, from fear, from the bone-deep exhaustion that had become her constant companion. Who are you? Her voice came out stronger than she expected. What do you want? The man dismounted. He was big, broad shoulders, heavy coat, a face half hidden by his collar and hat. Snow clung to his beard. His eyes, when they found hers, were dark and unreadable. I asked you a question. Ruth's chin lifted. State your business or leave my land. Your land. The man's voice was low, rough, like gravel over iron. This the Prescott place. What's left of it? He looked past her to the half-dug grave, to the porch where a small shape lay wrapped in white. His jaw tightened. The child. Ruth's throat closed. She couldn't answer. Fever took her this morning, Elijah said. His voice was steady, protective. My mama's been digging all day. Ground's too frozen. The stranger was quiet for a long moment. The wind howled around them. Snow continued to fall. Ruth waited for whatever came next, a demand for food, for shelter, for the few coins hidden beneath the loose floorboard. Instead, the man reached up and removed his hat. I'm sorry for your loss, ma'am. Ruth blinked. Whatever she'd expected, it wasn't that. Not respect, not courtesy. Not this rough-looking stranger holding his hat against his chest like he was in church. Who are you? She asked again, softer this time. Name's Silas Cobb. Got a place up the mountain about 3 miles north. He put his hat back on. I was riding to town when I saw your smoke. Thought I'd check if you needed anything. We don't need charity. Didn't offer any. Ruth's eyes narrowed. Then what are you offering Mr. Cobb? He looked at the grave again, at the shovel lying in the snow, at Ruth's bleeding hands. A strong back, he said simply. That ground ain't gonna dig itself, and you ain't in no condition to do it. I can manage. I can see that. His tone was dry, but not mocking. Way I figure it, you got two choices. Stand there arguing with me till you collapse, or let me help you bury your little girl proper. Which one keeps those other children from losing their mama, too? Ruth opened her mouth to refuse. The word was right there. No. She'd said it 1,000 times in the past 5 months. No to the neighbors who'd offered pity instead of help. No to the banker who'd offered a loan with terms that would have killed them faster than winter. No to the men who'd come sniffing around a widow's door looking for something that wasn't theirs to take. But this man wasn't looking at her like that. He wasn't looking at her like anything. He was looking at the grave, at the frozen ground, at the problem that needed solving. Why? The word escaped before she could stop it. Why would you help us? You don't know us. Silas Cobb was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was different, rougher, like the words cost him something. Had a wife once, he said, and a child that never got to draw breath. They're buried up on that mountain, and I dug those graves myself in ground, just as frozen as this. Ruth's breath caught. No one should have to bury their child alone, Mrs. Prescott. Not if there's someone who can help. The silence stretched between them. Wind. Snow. The distant sound of Mercy crying inside the soddy. Then Ruth stepped aside. The shovel's there, she said. We need another 2 feet at least. Silas Cobb picked up the shovel without another word and began to dig. He worked for 3 hours. Ruth sat on the porch steps and watched him, too exhausted to help, too stubborn to go inside. Elijah stayed beside her, his young body tense, his hand resting on the knife at his belt. You don't trust him, Ruth said quietly. Do you? I don't know. Then I don't either. Fair enough. Ruth had raised her children to be cautious, to question strangers, to never assume kindness came without a price. The frontier had taught her that lesson well enough. But as she watched Silas Cobb work steady, relentless, never slowing, she couldn't find the angle. Couldn't figure out what he wanted from them. The grave grew deeper. 2 feet. 2.5. 3. Finally he stopped, climbed out, drove the shovel into the dirt pile, and turned to face her. It's ready. Ruth stood. Her legs nearly buckled, but she forced them to hold. Thank you, Mr. Cobb. Silas? Thank you, Silas. She walked to the porch on unsteady feet, gathered the small cold bundle that had been her daughter, held Grace against her chest one last time. You were so loved, she whispered. So wanted. I'm sorry I couldn't keep you safe. I'm sorry I couldn't. Her voice broke. She couldn't finish. Elijah appeared beside her. I'll carry her, Mama. No, I need to do this. I need to. Let me help. Ruth looked at her son, at the tears streaming down his face, the ones he'd been hiding all day. He'd loved Grace too. He'd carried her on his shoulders, made her laugh, sung her to sleep when Ruth was too tired to do it herself. Together, Ruth said. We'll do it together. They walked to the grave side by side. Ruth knelt and lowered Grace into the earth. The bundle looked so small at the bottom of that dark hole, so alone. Mama! A new voice. Patience, standing in the doorway of the soddy, her face pale. Is it time? Yes, baby. Bring the others. They came one by one. Patience, 11 years old, and too serious, holding 2-year-old. No, Ruth reminded herself there was no 2-year-old anymore. Patience held Mercy, who was 5 and crying silently. The twins, Noah and Caleb, 6 years old, and identically scared, clutching each other's hands. And Ezra, 8 years old, leaning against the doorframe because he was too weak to stand without support, his cough rattling in his chest. 6 children. She had 6 children now. They gathered around the grave. Ruth wanted to speak, to say something about grace and heaven and God's mercy, but the words wouldn't come. What could she say? That God had a plan, that everything happened for a reason, that Grace was in a better place. She didn't believe any of it, not anymore. Mama! Mercy tugged at her skirt. Is Gracie going to be cold down there? Ruth's heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. No, sweetheart. She somehow kept her voice steady. Gracie's not cold anymore. She's warm now, warm and safe. Will she be lonely? No, your papa's with her. He'll take care of her until we see them again. It was a lie. Ruth wasn't sure there was a heaven anymore, wasn't sure William was waiting anywhere at all. But Mercy needed to hear it. They all needed to hear it. Can I sing to her? Mercy asked. She likes when I sing. Ruth nodded, unable to speak. And there in the snow, with the wind howling and a stranger standing at the edge of their grief, little Mercy Prescott began to sing. A lullaby Ruth had taught her. The same one Ruth's mother had sung, and her mother before that. Hush, little baby, don't say a word. The other children joined in one by one, even Elijah, his deep voice cracking on the high notes, even Ezra between coughs, even the twins who usually couldn't agree on anything. Ruth listened to her children sing to their dead sister, and something broke inside her that she knew would never heal. When the song ended, Silas Cobb stepped forward. May I? He gestured to the dirt pile. Ruth nodded. He picked up the shovel and began to fill the grave. Gently, carefully, like it mattered to him that this small girl be laid to rest with dignity. Ruth watched the dirt cover her daughter inch by inch, and when it was done, when the grave was a small mound in the snow, she felt the last of her strength leave her body. Her knees hit the ground. Mama! Elijah reached for her. I'm fine, But she wasn't fine. The world was spinning. Black spots danced at the edges of her vision. She'd been standing too long, working too hard, running on nothing but grief and stubbornness for too many hours. When did she eat last? Silas's voice directed at Elijah. I don't know. Yesterday, maybe. And sleep. She doesn't sleep. Not really. Not since Papa. Ruth wanted to protest, wanted to tell them she was fine. She just needed a minute. But the words wouldn't come. The darkness was closing in. Mrs. Prescott. Silas was kneeling in front of her, now his face inches from hers. Ruth, can you hear me? Yes, she managed. I'm going to pick you up now. Don't fight me. I can walk. No, ma'am, you can't. Before she could argue, his arms were under her knees and around her back. He lifted her like she weighed nothing, like she was a child herself, instead of a grown woman with 6 children. Put me down. Soon as you're inside. Mr. Cobb. Silas. Silas, I said put me down. He looked at her. Up close, she could see the lines around his eyes, the gray threading through his dark beard, the scar that ran from his temple to his jaw. A hard face. A face that had seen things, but his eyes weren't hard. They were tired, and sad, and somehow impossibly kind. Let me carry you, he said quietly. Just this once. Let me carry what you can't carry anymore. Ruth opened her mouth to refuse. To insist she didn't need help, didn't want help, had been carrying everything alone for 5 months, and could keep carrying it until she dropped. But she was so tired. And her baby was dead, and this stranger was warm against the cold. Just this once, she whispered. Silas Cobb carried her inside. The soddy was dark and cold. The fire had burned down to embers. Ruth saw everything through a haze, her children's faces, the empty cradle in the corner, the thin blankets that weren't keeping anyone warm enough. Silas set her down on the bed. It was nothing more than a straw tick on a wooden frame, but it felt like heaven. Elijah. His voice was steady, commanding. Get that fire built up. Use whatever wood you have. That's the last of it. Then I'll cut more. But first get those embers going. Your mama needs warmth. Elijah moved without arguing. Ruth wanted to tell him not to take orders from a stranger, but she couldn't find the energy. Patience. Silas turned to her next. You know how to make broth? Yes, sir. Do you have anything to make it with? Patience hesitated, looked at Ruth. Ruth closed her eyes. There's a chicken, Patience said softly. Our last one. Mama was saving it for... Kill it. Ruth's eyes flew open. No. Silas met her gaze. You need food. Your children need food. That boy, he nodded toward Ezra, needs hot broth in him before that cough turns into something worse. The chicken dies tonight. If we kill the chicken, we have nothing left. If you die, your children have nothing left either. The words hit her like a slap. Ruth stared at this man, this stranger who'd walked out of a snowstorm and started giving orders in her home. Who do you think you are? A man who's buried his family and knows what happens when people stop eating. Silas crouched beside the bed, bringing his face level with hers. You want to argue with me, fine. We can argue. But first, you're going to eat something. Your children are going to eat something. And that boy over there is going to get medicine for his chest. We don't have medicine. I sold the last of it 2 weeks ago. I have some, at my cabin. Ruth laughed. It came out broken jagged. And how are we supposed to get to your cabin, Mr. Cobb walked through a blizzard. I've got a wagon. It's tied up down the ridge. I was heading to town for supplies when I saw your smoke. He paused. Your place is on the way to nowhere, Mrs. Prescott. If I hadn't turned off the main trail, I never would have found you. Then maybe you shouldn't have turned. Maybe not. His voice softened. But I did. They stared at each other. Ruth saw something in his face, a flicker of something human beneath the weathered exterior. Pain, maybe? Or loneliness? Or just the simple, stubborn need to help someone who couldn't be helped? Why? She asked. Why do you care what happens to us? Silas was quiet for a long moment. The fire crackled behind him. The wind moaned outside. Ezra coughed and Ruth heard the wet rattle that kept her awake at night. Because I spent 7 years alone on that mountain, he said finally. 7 years talking to nobody but my horse and my ghosts. And I told myself I was fine. Told myself I didn't need anyone. He looked away. I was wrong. And helping us fixes that? No. He met her eyes again. But watching you die won't fix it either. Ruth felt tears burn in her eyes. She blinked them back. She'd cried enough for one day, cried enough for a lifetime. The chicken, she said. In the coop behind the house, the door sticks. Silas nodded and stood. I'll get it. You rest. I don't need. Ruth. His voice was firm but gentle. You just buried your daughter. You haven't eaten in 2 days. You've got 6 children depending on you to survive. Rest isn't weakness, it's strategy. He walked out before she could respond. Ruth lay there in the dark, listening to her children move around her. Elijah, building up the fire. Patience heading out to help with the chicken. The twins whispering to each other by the stove. Mercy climbing onto the bed and curling against Ruth's side. Mama. Yes, baby. Is that man going to help us? Ruth looked at the door Silas had walked through. She thought about his hands strong and capable, his eyes sad and knowing, his voice when he'd asked to carry her. I don't know, she said honestly. I hope so. I like him. You don't know him, Mercy. I know he dug Gracie's grave. I know he carried you inside. Mercy snuggled closer. Papa never carried you. He was always too sick. Ruth's chest tightened. Out of the mouths of babes. Get some sleep, sweetheart. Will you sleep too? Ruth closed her eyes. She could smell the fire building, hear Patience and Silas talking outside. Feel Mercy's small warmth against her side. Tomorrow she would have to think about what came next. Tomorrow she would have to figure out how to survive without Grace, without food, without hope. Tomorrow she would have to face whatever price this stranger would eventually ask for his kindness. But tonight, just for tonight, she would rest. "Yes, baby," Ruth whispered. "I'll sleep too." And for the first time in months, she did. Ruth woke to the smell of chicken broth. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. The warmth confused her. The softness beneath her back. The absence of Mercy's small body pressed against her side. Then it came back. Grace. The grave. The stranger. She sat up too fast. Her head spun. "Easy!" Silas's voice came from somewhere near the stove. "You've been out for 6 hours." 6 hours. Ruth's feet hit the floor before she could think. The children. Ezra. Fed and sleeping. All of them. She stood anyway, swaying, scanning the room. The fire was roaring now, hotter than it had been in weeks. The children were scattered across the floor on pallets she didn't recognize, thick blankets, not the threadbare scraps they'd been using. Elijah sat against the wall, his knife in his lap, his eyes fixed on Silas. Not sleeping then. Watching. Where did the blankets come from? "My cabin. I rode back while you were out." "In the storm." "Storm's letting up." Silas ladled broth into a bowl. "Eat." "I'm not hungry." "Didn't ask if you were hungry." Ruth's jaw tightened. "Mr. Cobb." "Silas." "Silas. I appreciate what you've done, truly, but I don't take orders in my own home." He set the bowl on the table, met her eyes. "Then consider it a strong suggestion from a man who watched you collapse 6 hours ago." They stared at each other. Ruth felt the heat rise in her cheeks, anger or embarrassment, she couldn't tell which. "Mama." Elijah's voice cut through the tension. "Just eat, please." Ruth looked at her son, at the fear beneath his stubborn expression, at the way he gripped that knife like it was the only thing keeping him tethered to earth. She sat down and picked up the spoon. The broth was good, better than anything she'd made in months. Rich with meat and fat seasoned with herbs she couldn't identify. She ate slowly at first, then faster, her body remembering what hunger felt like now that food was in front of her. "When did you learn to cook?" she asked between bites. 7 years alone. You learn or you starve. Most men would starve. Most men are fools." Ruth almost smiled. Almost. "Ezra," she said. "How bad is he?" Silas's expression shifted. Something dark passed across his face. "Bad enough. That cough's been building for a while." "Weeks, maybe longer." Ruth set down her spoon, her appetite gone. "I had medicine. Sold the last of it to buy flour." "Flour you don't have anymore." "The sack split. Day before yesterday." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Everything I try to save, I lose. Everything I try to hold on to slips through my fingers." "Not everything." Silas nodded toward the sleeping children. "They're still here." "For how long?" The question hung in the air. Ruth hadn't meant to ask it. Hadn't meant to voice the fear that kept her awake every night. The certainty that one by one, God would take them all from her until she was alone in this soddy, with nothing but ghosts. "That depends," Silas said quietly. "On what?" "On whether you'll let someone help you." Ruth's hands curled into fists on the table. "I've had help offered before, Mr. Cobb. It always comes with a price." "Everything comes with a price." "And what's yours?" He was quiet for a long moment. The fire crackled. Outside, the wind had died to a murmur. Ruth could hear Ezra's labored breathing from across the room, the wet rattle that haunted her dreams. "I don't know yet," Silas said finally. "But it ain't what you're thinking." "You don't know what I'm thinking." I know you're a widow with 6 children and no husband. I know what men think when they see that. I know what they want." His voice hardened. "I ain't one of those men." "Then what kind of man are you?" Silas stood, walked to the window. His back was to her, broad and tense. "The kind who buried his wife and son 7 years ago and ain't spoken more than 10 words to another soul since." He turned to face her. "The kind who saw you kneeling in that snow and couldn't ride past. The kind who—" He stopped. His jaw worked like he was chewing on words he couldn't swallow. "The kind who what?" Ruth pressed. "The kind who's tired of being alone." The admission fell between them like a stone in still water. Ruth didn't know what to say. Didn't know how to respond to this rough stranger who'd appeared out of a blizzard and turned her world upside down. "Mama!" Ezra's voice, weak and thready, followed by a coughing fit that seemed to tear at his small chest. Ruth was on her feet before she knew she'd moved. She crossed the room and knelt beside her son, her hand going to his forehead. Hot. Too hot. "I'm here, baby. I'm here." "It hurts." Ezra's eyes were glassy, unfocused. "My chest hurts." I know it hurts." Ruth looked at Silas over her shoulder. "You said you had medicine. At my cabin, we'd have to move him." "In this weather?" "Storm's breaking. By morning the roads will be passable." He crouched beside her, his hand hovering over Ezra's chest, like he wanted to touch but didn't dare. "He needs warmth, hot food and rest, more than this place can give him." Ruth's throat tightened. She looked around the sagging roof, the drafty walls, the cold that seeped in through every crack no matter how high they built the fire. This place had never been more than a dream held together with sod and prayer. Now even the prayer was gone. "I can't ask you to." "You're not asking, I'm offering." "Why?" The word came out sharper than she intended. "Why do you care what happens to us? You don't know us. You don't owe us anything." Silas looked at Ezra, at the small boy fighting for each breath, and Ruth saw something in his face that made her chest ache. "I had a son," he said quietly. "Never got to hold him. Never got to hear him cry or laugh or call me Pa." He met her eyes. "I can't bring him back. Can't undo what God took from me. But maybe—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "Maybe what? Maybe I can keep someone else from losing what I lost." Ruth's eyes burned. She blinked hard, refusing to cry again. She'd cried enough for a lifetime in the past 24 hours. "Mama!" Ezra's small hand found hers. "Am I going to die, like Gracie?" The question hit Ruth like a physical blow. She gathered her son into her arms, holding him against her chest, feeling his heart flutter like a trapped bird. "No, baby. No, you're not going to die. I won't let you. Promise." Ruth looked at Silas. At this stranger who'd offered her more help in one day than anyone had in 5 months. At his rough hands and sad eyes and the grief that lived in the lines of his face. "I promise," she whispered. And for the first time, she meant it. They left at dawn. Ruth had expected Elijah to fight her, expected arguments, protests, the stubborn set of his jaw that meant he'd dig in his heels and refuse to budge. Instead, he helped load the wagon in silence, his face unreadable. "You're not going to tell me I'm making a mistake?" Ruth asked, as they secured the last of their meager belongings. Elijah paused. His hands were steady on the rope, but Ruth could see the tension in his shoulders. "Would it matter if I did?" "It might." "Then yes." He pulled the knot tight. "I think you're making a mistake. I think we don't know this man. I think he could be anyone, a criminal, a lunatic, He dug your sister's grave. That doesn't make him trustworthy." "No." Ruth touched her son's face. "But it makes him kind. And right now, kindness is the only thing that might save your brother's life." Elijah's jaw worked. "And if you're wrong?" If he turns out to be something other than what he seems, then we'll handle it. Together, like we've handled everything else." Mother and son looked at each other. So much passed between them in that silence, grief and fear, and the stubborn love that had kept them both standing when everything else fell apart. "I'll keep watch," Elijah said finally. "Every minute, if he tries anything." "I know." Ruth pulled him into a hug. "I know you will." The ride up the mountain took 3 hours. Silas drove the wagon while Ruth sat in the back with Ezra's head in her lap, monitoring every breath, every cough, every flutter of his eyelids. Patience kept the twins calm with stories. Mercy had claimed the seat beside Silas and chattered at him non-stop about the horses, about the snow, about why the sky was blue and where birds went in winter. Silas answered every question. Patiently, seriously, like a 5-year-old's curiosity was the most important thing in the world. "You're good with her," Ruth said during a quiet moment when Mercy had finally run out of questions and dozed off against Silas's arm. "She reminds me of someone." "Who?" "Eleanor, my wife." He didn't look at Ruth. "She talked like that, asked questions about everything, wanted to know how the world worked." "What happened to her?" The question was too direct. Ruth knew it the moment it left her mouth. But Silas didn't flinch. "Died in childbirth, both of them, her and the baby." "I'm sorry." "So am I." He was quiet for a moment. "I spent a long time being angry about it. Angry at God, at the doctors, at myself for not being able to save them. Then the anger burned out, and all that was left was silence." "Is that why you live alone, up here on the mountain?" "That's why I lived alone." He glanced at her over his shoulder. Past tense. Ruth didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. The cabin appeared through the trees just as Ezra's cough turned into something worse. He'd been struggling for the last mile. Each breath, a battle. Each exhale, a wet rattle that made Ruth's stomach clench. Now he was gasping, his small body convulsing with the effort to draw air into lungs that refused to cooperate. "Silas, I see it." He was already pulling the wagon up to the porch, already jumping down, already reaching for Ezra. "Get the door. Left side of the cabin there's a medicine chest. Brown bottle with a cork stopper. Bring it." Ruth ran. The cabin was larger than she'd expected. Warmer. A fire already burned in the hearth. How she didn't know, didn't care. And she found the medicine chest exactly where Silas had said. She grabbed the brown bottle and ran back outside. Silas had carried Ezra inside and laid him on a bed near the fire. The boy was blue around the lips, his chest heaving, his eyes rolling back in his head. "Hold him steady." Silas uncorked the bottle. "This is going to taste bad, but he needs to swallow it." "What is it?" "Something the doc in town gave me for lung fever. Saved my life once." He measured out a spoonful. Ezra, can you hear me?" The boy's eyes focused. "Barely." "I need you to swallow this. Can you do that for me?" Ezra nodded weakly. Silas tipped the spoon into his mouth. The boy gagged, coughed, almost spit it out, but Ruth held him, murmuring soft words, and he swallowed. "Good boy." Silas's voice was rough. "Good boy. Now we wait." "Wait for what?" "For it to work." He met Ruth's eyes. "It might take a while. Could be hours. Could be—" He didn't finish. He didn't have to. Ruth gathered Ezra into her arms and began to pray. Not to God, she wasn't sure she believed in God anymore. Just to the universe, to fate, to whatever force controlled the thin line between life and death. "Please. Please don't take another one. I can't bury another child. I can't survive that again." The other children had gathered in the doorway. Patience holding Mercy, the twins clutching each other. Elijah standing apart, his face carved from stone. "Is Ezra going to be okay?" Noah asked. "Or maybe Caleb?" Ruth couldn't tell them apart when they were scared. "Yes," she said, because she had to say it, because believing anything else would destroy her. "Yes, he's going to be fine." The hours crept past. Ruth didn't move from Ezra's side. She held his hand, wiped his forehead, counted his breaths like they were prayers. The other children drifted in and out, sleeping, eating the food Silas prepared, watching their brother with wide, frightened eyes. Silas stayed nearby. He didn't hover, didn't intrude, but he was there. Every time Ruth looked up, she found him, tending the fire, feeding the children, answering Mercy's endless questions with patience Ruth couldn't have mustered on her best day. "You should sleep," he said finally sometime after midnight. "I'll watch him." "I can't." "Ruth, I said I can't." Her voice cracked. If something happens while I'm sleeping, then I'll wake you. I swear it." She shook her head. "He's my son. My responsibility. And you're no good to him dead on your feet." Silas crouched beside her, his face level with hers. "You've been awake for almost 2 days. You've buried one child and nearly lost another. Your body can't take much more. My body will take what it has to take. That's not strength. That's stubbornness. It's all I have left." Something shifted in Silas's expression. He reached out slowly, carefully, like approaching a wounded animal, and took her hand. "You've got more than that," he said quietly. "You've got 6 children who need you. You've got a roof over your head, at least for now, and you've got—" He stopped. "Got what?" "Someone who wants to help, if you'll let him." Ruth looked at their joined hands. His were rough, calloused, scarred from years of hard work. Hers were raw and bleeding, the blisters from the grave still fresh. 2 broken people holding on to each other in the dark. "Why?" she whispered. "Why do you want to help us so badly?" Silas was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was different, softer, vulnerable in a way that made Ruth's chest ache. "Because you remind me that I'm still alive." The words hung between them. Ruth felt something crack open inside her, some wall she'd built around her heart in the months since William died. She'd been so focused on surviving, on keeping her children fed and warm and breathing, that she'd forgotten what it felt like to be seen, to be cared for, to matter to someone as more than just a mother, or a widow, or a burden. "Silas! Mama!" Elijah's voice sharp and urgent. Ruth turned to find her son standing at the foot of the bed, his face pale. "What is it?" "He's breathing different." Ruth's heart stopped. She looked at Ezra and realized Elijah was right. The rattling was gone. The desperate gasping had eased. Her son was breathing. Really breathing. Deep, even breaths that spoke of healing instead of struggle. "The fever." Ruth pressed her hand to Ezra's forehead. "It's breaking. Silas, his fever is breaking." Silas was at her side in an instant. He checked Ezra's pulse. His breathing, the color returning to his cheeks. "He's past the worst of it." His voice was thick. "He's going to make it." Ruth's legs gave out. She would have fallen if Silas hadn't caught her. "I've got you," he murmured, his arms strong around her. "I've got you." And Ruth Ellen Prescott, who hadn't let anyone hold her since her husband died, who had carried everything alone for 5 months, who had built walls around her heart so high she thought nothing could ever breach them, collapsed against this stranger's chest and sobbed. Morning came slowly. Ruth woke in a chair by Ezra's bed, a blanket draped over her shoulders that she didn't remember putting there. The fire had been built up, the cabin was warm, and her son was awake, looking at her with clear eyes for the first time in weeks. "Mama, I'm here, baby." She took his hand. "How do you feel? Hungry?" Ruth laughed. Actually laughed, a sound that startled her, that felt foreign in her throat. "That's the best thing you could have said. Mr. Cobb made biscuits." Patience appeared beside the bed, a plate in her hands. "He said Ezra should start with broth, but when he's ready there's real food." "Where is Mr. Cobb?" "Outside, chopping wood with Elijah." Ruth's eyebrows rose. "Elijah is helping him. They've been out there since sunrise." Patience set the plate down, her face carefully neutral. Elijah asked him to teach him how to swing an axe properly. Said Papa never got the chance. Ruth's throat tightened. She thought about her son, her stubborn, suspicious, fiercely protective son, choosing to learn from the man he'd watched like a hawk for 2 days. It meant something. She wasn't sure what yet, but it meant something. "Watch your brother," she told Patience. "I'll be right back." She found them behind the cabin. Elijah had his shirt off, despite the cold sweat rolling down his back as he swung the axe at a thick log. His form was wrong, she could see that even without knowing anything about chopping wood, but he was trying, really trying. Silas stood a few feet away watching. "Widen your stance," he said, "and don't muscle it. Let the weight of the axe do the work." Elijah adjusted, swung again. The log split cleanly down the middle. "Better." Silas nodded. "Much better. I've been doing it wrong my whole life. You've been doing it alone. That's different." Ruth watched them from the corner of the cabin, her heart full of something she couldn't name. This was what her children needed. Not just food and shelter and warmth, though they needed those desperately, but guidance. Teaching. A steady hand when the world felt like it was falling apart. William had tried. God knows he'd tried. But the sickness had taken him so slowly, stolen pieces of him day by day, until there was nothing left but a shell in a bed. He hadn't had time to teach Elijah how to be a man, hadn't had time to show him how to chop wood or hunt or fix a broken fence. This stranger had done more in 2 days than William had managed in his last 2 years of life, and Ruth didn't know whether to be grateful or guilty or something else entirely. "Mrs. Prescott." She jumped. Silas had spotted her. "Ruth," she corrected automatically. "Ruth." He walked toward her, leaving Elijah to practice. "How's the boy?" "Awake, hungry." She paused. "Alive, thanks to you." "Thanks to God." "I don't believe in God anymore." The words came out before she could stop them. Ruth felt her cheeks flush. She hadn't meant to say, that hadn't meant to voice the bitter truth that had been growing inside her since Grace died. Since William died. Since the world proved over and over that no amount of prayer could stop the people she loved from being taken away. Silas didn't look shocked. Didn't lecture her. Didn't tell her she was wrong. "Neither do I," he said quietly. "Not since Eleanor." They stood there in the cold, two people who had lost their faith and found each other instead. Ruth didn't know what to say. Didn't know how to navigate this strange territory of shared grief and unexpected connection. "Mama." Mercy came running around the corner of the cabin, her cheeks red from the cold. "Mama, there's a man coming up the road. He's wearing black and he's got a big fancy horse." Ruth's blood turned to ice. She knew who wore black, knew who rode fancy horses into the mountains in winter. There was only one person it could be. Silas. Her voice came out strangled. "It's my brother-in-law, Josiah Whitfield." Silas's expression hardened. "The preacher. How did you—" "I've heard of him. He came through town a few years back trying to convince people their souls needed saving." Silas's jaw clenched. He was more interested in their money than their salvation. "He wants my children." The words tumbled out panicked. "He's wanted them since William died. Said I was unfit. Said a woman alone couldn't raise 6-7. Ruth's throat closed. "He tried to take them before. I thought I moved out here to get away from him, but he must have followed—" "Ruth." Silas's hands were on her shoulders, steady and strong. "Look at me." She looked. "He's not taking anyone. Not today. Not ever." His eyes were fierce. "Do you hear me? Whatever happens next, you're not alone anymore." The sound of hooves grew louder. Ruth turned to see a black carriage cresting the ridge pulled by 2 matching horses that cost more than her entire homestead. Reverend Josiah Whitfield had found her, and Ruth Ellen Prescott was done running. The carriage stopped 20 feet from the cabin. Ruth watched Josiah Whitfield step down, his black coat pristine, his boots polished to a shine that had no business existing in the Colorado mountains. 7 years since she'd seen him last. 7 years since William's funeral, where he'd stood over the grave and told her she was unfit to raise her own children. He hadn't changed. Same cold eyes, same thin-lipped smile, same air of righteous certainty that made her skin crawl. Ruth. His voice carried across the distance. Smooth, practiced. The voice of a man who preached hellfire on Sundays and counted collection plates on Mondays. I've been looking for you. I wasn't hiding. No. He gestured at the mountain, the isolation, the miles of nothing between them and civilization. Could have fooled me. Silas stepped forward, not in front of Ruth, beside her, his presence solid and steady. You're on my land, he said. State your business. Josiah's eyes flicked to him. Assessed, dismissed. This doesn't concern you. You're standing on my property. That makes it my concern. And who might you be? Silas Cobb. I own everything from this ridge to the valley floor. His voice was flat hard. Now I'll ask again. What do you want? Josiah smiled. The expression didn't reach his eyes. I want what's best for my brother's children. Surely you can understand that. Your brother's dead. Ruth's voice came out stronger than she expected. These are my children now. Are they? Josiah pulled a folded paper from his coat. Because I have a document here that says otherwise. Signed by Judge Morrison in Denver. It declares you mentally unfit to care for minors and transfers custody to me as their nearest male relative. Ruth's blood went cold. That's not possible. It's not only possible, it's legal. Josiah held up the paper. I have witnesses who testified to your instability, your inability to provide proper care, your moral failings. What witnesses? What are you talking about? The shopkeeper in Silver Creek, the banker who denied your loan application, the neighbors who watched you sell everything you owned and run into the wilderness with 7 children. Josiah's smile widened. They all agree, Ruth. You're not fit to raise these children. You never were. That's a lie. Is it? He tucked the paper back into his coat. I have testimonies. I have a judge's signature. I have the law on my side. He spread his hands. What do you have? Ruth couldn't answer. Her throat had closed up. Her mind was spinning, trying to process what was happening, trying to find a way out of a trap she hadn't seen coming. Mama? Elijah's voice. He'd come around the cabin, axe still in his hand. His face was pale, his eyes darting between Ruth and the stranger in black. Mama, what's going on? Go inside, Elijah. But, go inside. Now. Take your sisters and brothers and stay there until I come for you. Elijah hesitated. His grip tightened on the axe handle. Boy. Silas's voice was calm, but firm. Your mother needs you to protect the others. Can you do that? Something passed between them. Some silent understanding that Ruth couldn't quite follow. Then Elijah nodded and disappeared around the corner of the cabin. Touching. Josiah clasped his hands behind his back. The hired help playing father. Tell me, Ruth, is this the man you've been living with? The man you've been associating with? I don't owe you explanations. No, but you do owe your children a mother who doesn't drag them into sin. He shook his head, the picture of sorrow. William would be ashamed. Don't you dare. Ruth's voice shook. Don't you dare speak his name. He was my brother. He was my husband, the father of my children. And you didn't come to see him once in the 2 years he was dying. Not once. I had obligations. You had pride. Ruth stepped forward. You couldn't stand that he chose me. Couldn't stand that he left your fancy church to build a life out here. So you waited. You waited until he was dead, until I was alone, until you thought I was weak enough to break. Josiah's mask slipped. Just for a moment. Ruth saw the anger beneath hot and ugly and nothing like the Christian charity he preached. "I'm trying to save those children." "You're trying to punish me." "I'm trying to give them a proper home, an education, a future that doesn't involve freezing to death in a hovel in the mountains." "This isn't a hovel." Silas's voice cut through. "This is my home, and those children are welcome in it for as long as their mother wants to stay." Josiah turned to him fully. "And what exactly is your interest in this family? Mr. Cobb, a widow with 6 children, isn't usually considered desirable company." 7. The word came from Ruth, soft, broken. Josiah frowned. "What?" "I had 7 children. Grace died 3 days ago." Ruth's eyes burned. "I buried her myself, dug the grave with my own hands. And this man, this stranger you're looking down your nose at, he finished the job when I couldn't. He saved my son's life. He gave us shelter and food and warmth. He did more for my family in 3 days than you've done in 7 years. Ruth, I'm not finished." She was shaking now, trembling with rage and grief and something else, something that had been building since the moment she saw that black carriage on the ridge. "You want to talk about fitness, about morality, about what's best for children. Let's talk about what you did to William." Josiah went still. "Let's talk about how you told him he wasn't good enough. How you made him feel like a failure every day of his life. How you convinced your parents to cut him off when he married me, left him with nothing, forced him to come west to escape your shadow." "That's ancient history." "That's why he died." Ruth's voice cracked. "He worked himself into the ground, trying to prove he was worth something. Trying to build a life that would make you eat your words. And when his body gave out, when he was lying in that bed coughing up blood, you know what he said? He said he was sorry. Sorry he couldn't do better. Sorry he couldn't be more like you." Tears streamed down her face. She didn't bother wiping them away. "He died thinking he was a failure because of you. And now you come here with your papers and your judge and your righteous indignation, and you want to take his children. Our children. The only thing he left behind that mattered." Josiah's face had gone red. "I'm offering them a better life." "You're offering them a cage, a life where they'll never be good enough, never be holy enough, never live up to whatever impossible standard you set." Ruth's chin lifted. "I won't let you do to them what you did to their father." "You don't have a choice." Josiah's voice was ice. "The law is on my side." "Then the law is wrong." "Mama." Ruth's heart stopped. Mercy stood in the cabin doorway, her eyes wide and frightened. Behind her, Ruth could see the other children, Patience holding the twins. Elijah with his arm around Ezra, all of them staring at the scene unfolding in the yard. "Mama, who is that man?" Josiah's expression transformed, softened into something that looked almost kind. "Hello, little one. I'm your Uncle Josiah, your Papa's brother." Mercy pressed closer to the doorframe. "Papa's dead." "I know, sweetheart, I know. That's why I'm here." He crouched down, making himself smaller, less threatening. "I've come to take you somewhere safe, somewhere warm, with good food and soft beds, and we don't want to go." Patience's voice, 11 years old and sharp as a knife. Josiah's smile flickered. "I'm sure your mother has told you stories, but she hasn't told us anything." Patience stepped forward, placing herself between her siblings and the stranger. "We don't know who you are. We don't want to know. And we're not going anywhere with you." "Young lady, I understand you're scared, but I'm not scared." Patience's eyes were hard. "I'm angry. You show up here with your fancy clothes and your fancy horse, and you think you can just take us like we're things, like we don't get a say. The law. I don't care about the law." Her voice rose. "My mama buried my sister 3 days ago. My brother almost died. And through all of it, she was there. She held us. She fed us. She kept us alive. Where were you?" Josiah straightened, His false warmth evaporated. Your mother is not capable of... She's more capable than anyone I know. Patience's chin trembled, but she didn't back down. She taught me to read. She taught Elijah to hunt. She nursed Ezra through the worst of his sickness. She sang Mercy to sleep every night, even when she was so tired she could barely stand. Patience, Ruth started. No, Mama. He needs to hear this. Patience's eyes never left Josiah. You think you can give us a better life, you can't. Because a better life isn't about money or houses or education. It's about love. And you don't have any. Not for us. Not for anyone. The silence that followed was deafening. Josiah's face had gone from red to white. His hands clenched at his sides. Ruth could see him struggling, the mask of Christian benevolence warring with the rage underneath. I didn't want to do this, he said finally. His voice was different now, harder. I tried to be reasonable. I tried to give you a chance to come quietly. But if you want to make this difficult... He reached into his coat and pulled out another paper. This is a warrant, signed by Sheriff Collins in Denver. It authorizes me to take custody of the children by force if necessary. Ruth's legs went weak. You can't. I can, and I will. Josiah folded the warrant and tucked it away. I have men waiting at the bottom of the mountain, a wagon to transport the children. Everything has been arranged. You planned this. Silas's voice was deadly quiet. This whole thing. You planned it. I'm a man who believes in preparation, Mr. Cobb. Josiah smiled. The law is on my side. God is on my side. And there is nothing you or this fallen woman can do to stop me. He turned toward the carriage. I'll return in 1 hour with my men. I suggest you use that time to say your goodbyes. Wait. The word came from Silas. Josiah paused, turned back. What if she wasn't alone? Ruth's head snapped toward him. Silas. What if she had a husband? Silas continued. A man to provide for the family, to give those children a proper home. His eyes locked with Josiah's. Would your warrant still hold? Josiah's smile faded. She doesn't have a husband. She could. What are you saying? Silas turned to Ruth. His eyes were steady, certain. Marry me. The world stopped. Ruth heard herself make a sound something between a gasp and a sob. Silas, you can't. I can. I'm asking. You don't even know me. I know enough. He took her hands. His grip was warm, solid, real. I know you'd die for those children. I know you've carried them through hell without breaking. I know you're the strongest woman I've ever met, and I know... His voice roughened. I know I'm tired of being alone, tired of waking up to silence, tired of pretending I don't need anyone. He held her eyes. Marry me, Ruth. Let me help you fight this. This is ridiculous. Josiah's voice cut through. You can't just... I'm not talking to you. Silas didn't look away from Ruth. I'm talking to her. Ruth's mind was spinning. This was insane. She'd known this man for 3 days. 3 days of shared grief and unexpected kindness and something else, something she was afraid to name. But her children were watching. Her children who had lost their father and their baby sister and their home. Her children who were about to be ripped away from her by a man who'd never loved them, never known them, never cared about anything but his own wounded pride. Yes. The word came out before she could stop it. Silas's breath caught. Ruth. Yes. Stronger now. Certain. I'll marry you. This doesn't change anything. Josiah's voice was shrill. A marriage of convenience won't fool anyone. The judge will see right through it. Maybe. Ruth turned to face him. But it'll buy us time. Time to appeal. Time to find a lawyer. Time to prove you're not the saint you pretend to be. You can't prove anything. Can't I? She stepped toward him. I have letters, Josiah. Letters William wrote me before he died. Letters where he told me everything. How you cheated him out of his inheritance. How you lied to your parents about the circumstances of our marriage. How you threatened him if he ever came back east." Josiah's face went pale. "He kept them all. Every cruel word you ever wrote him. Every threat, every manipulation, every piece of evidence that shows exactly what kind of man you really are." Ruth's voice was steel. "You want to go to court? Fine. Let's go to court. And let's see how your precious reputation holds up when those letters become public record." "You're bluffing." "Try me." They stared at each other, years of hatred and resentment crackling in the air between them. Ruth felt her heart pounding, felt the fear trying to claw its way up her throat. But she didn't back down. She couldn't. Not now. Not with everything at stake. 1 hour. Josiah's voice was barely a whisper. "You have 1 hour." He climbed into his carriage and was gone. Ruth's knees buckled. Silas caught her before she hit the ground. "I've got you," he murmured. "I've got you." "The letters." Her voice came out strangled. I don't have any letters. I made it up." Silas was quiet for a moment. Then impossibly, he laughed. "You bluffed a preacher." "I bluffed a monster." Ruth pressed her face into his chest. "And now I have an hour to figure out how to back it up. We'll figure it out together." "Silas," she pulled back looking at him. "What you offered the marriage you don't have to. I meant it. You barely know me." "I know enough." He touched her face. "I know you're worth fighting for. I know those children are worth protecting. And I know—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "What?" "I know I've spent 7 years building walls around my heart, telling myself I didn't deserve to be happy again. And then you showed up in that snowstorm, and everything I'd built came crashing down." Ruth's eyes burned. "This isn't love, Silas. This is desperation." "Maybe." He brushed a tear from her cheek. "But it could be love. If we gave it time." "Mama!" Elijah stood in the doorway, his siblings clustered behind him. His face was pale but determined. "What do you need us to do?" Ruth looked at her children, at their scared, hopeful faces, at Silas standing beside her, ready to fight a battle that wasn't his. "We need a preacher," she said. "A real one. Someone who isn't Josiah." "There's Reverend Thomas in Silver Creek." Silas straightened. "It's a 2-hour ride, but if I leave now, you'll never make it back in time." "Then I'll bring him back with me. Force the issue." His jaw set. "Either way, we're getting married today. Legally, properly, in front of witnesses. And if Josiah comes back before you return?" Silas looked at Elijah, at the axe still in the boy's hand, at the determination in his young eyes. "Then you hold the line until I get back." He was gone before Ruth could argue. The hour passed like a lifetime. Ruth sat on the cabin porch with her children around her, watching the road, waiting for the sound of hooves. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. "Mama!" Mercy crawled into her lap. "Are we going to be okay?" "Yes, baby. We're going to be okay. Promise." Ruth held her daughter close, breathed in the smell of her hair soap and wood smoke, and something uniquely Mercy. "I promise." "Mama." This from Ezra, still weak, but sitting up on his own. "Is Mr. Cobb really going to be our new papa?" "Would you want that?" Ezra considered the question seriously. "He's nice. He makes good biscuits. And he saved my life." "That's not enough reason to marry someone." "Why not?" Ruth didn't have an answer. "I like him," Patience said quietly. "He looks at you like Papa used to, before he got sick." "Patience. I know it's fast, Mama. I know it doesn't make sense. But sometimes—" She trailed off. "Sometimes the things that save us don't make sense. They just happen, and we have to trust them." Ruth stared at her daughter, 11 years old and wiser than anyone had a right to be. "When did you grow up so much?" "When you weren't looking." Patience almost smiled. Just like Elijah. Just like all of us. I'm sorry. Don't be. Patience took her hand. You did your best. You always did your best. That's more than a lot of mothers can say. The sound of hooves. Ruth's head snapped up. Her stomach dropped. 2 horses, coming fast from the direction of town. Elijah! I see them. He was on his feet, axe ready. Get the others inside. Elijah, if it's Josiah. It's not. He squinted into the distance. It's Mr. Cobb, and he's got someone with him. Ruth's heart leaped. Silas rode into the yard at a gallop, a second rider close behind. The second man was young, barely 30, with kind eyes and a preacher's collar. Ruth Prescott. He dismounted quickly. I'm Reverend Thomas. Silas tells me you need to get married. Now. Yes. Yes, we do. Then let's not waste time. He pulled a small book from his saddlebag. Where do you want to do this? Right here. Ruth stood up, Mercy still in her arms. Right here on the porch, in front of my children, in front of God if he's listening. Silas was at her side in an instant. He took her free hand. His grip was steady. Are you sure? He asked quietly. You can still say no. I'm sure. She looked into his eyes, those sad, kind eyes that had seen too much and still somehow kept hoping. I'm sure. Reverend Thomas opened his book, Dearly Beloved. The sound of wheels. Heavy rumbling coming up the mountain road. Josiah's carriage appeared around the bend, and behind it, a wagon full of men. Keep going, Ruth said. Don't stop. The Reverend nodded and picked up his pace. We are gathered here today to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony. Josiah was out of the carriage, his face twisted with rage. Stop this! This marriage is a sham, which is an honorable estate instituted of God. I have a warrant. I have legal authority. Ruth held Silas's hand tighter. Do you, Silas Jeremiah Cobb, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. Josiah was coming up the steps. 2 men flanked him, big, rough, hired muscle. Do you, Ruth Ellen Prescott, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? Ruth looked at Josiah, at his rage, at his certainty, at the hatred burning in his eyes. Then she looked at Silas, at his hope, his strength, his quiet, steady love. I do. Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Colorado, I pronounce you husband and wife. No. Josiah lunged forward. Elijah stepped into his path, axe raised. Touch my mother, and I'll take your hand off. You little... That's my son. Silas's voice was calm, but his eyes were dangerous. And my wife, and my family, and you're trespassing on my land. Josiah stopped. His breath came in ragged gasps. His men hesitated behind him. This changes nothing. The warrant applies to a widow living alone with her children. Reverend Thomas stepped forward. Mrs. Cobb is neither alone nor a widow anymore. She's a married woman with a husband of good standing. Your warrant is worthless. I'll get another one. Try. Silas moved between Josiah and Ruth, his body a wall of protection. And while you're at it, maybe explain to that judge why you've been harassing a grieving mother, why you've been threatening her children, why you've been so desperate to control a family that wants nothing to do with you. I'm trying to save them. You're trying to own them. Ruth's voice rang out clear and strong. Just like you tried to own William. But you can't own people, Josiah. You can't buy them or bully them or beat them into submission. That's not love. That's not family. That's prison. Ruth, go home. She stepped forward, standing beside Silas. Go back to your church and your empty house and your congregation that fears you more than they love you. Go back to your life and leave us alone. This isn't over. Yes, it is. Ruth lifted her chin. Because I'm not afraid of you anymore, and without fear you have nothing. Josiah stared at her, at the woman he'd spent 7 years trying to break. And for the first time, Ruth saw something in his eyes that looked like defeat. He turned away, climbed into his carriage, and drove down the mountain without looking back. Ruth watched until he disappeared. Then her legs gave out. "Mama!" Elijah was there catching her. "I'm okay." She wasn't. She was crying and laughing and shaking all at once. "I'm okay. We're okay. We're married." Silas knelt beside her, his face full of wonder and disbelief. "Ruth, we're actually married." "I know." "I didn't think, I hoped, but—" She kissed him. Right there on the porch in front of her children and Reverend Thomas and God and everyone. She kissed her husband, her second chance, her unexpected gift, her answer to a prayer she hadn't even known she was praying. When she pulled back, he was smiling. A real smile, wide and bright, that transformed his weathered face into something almost boyish. "Well then," he said softly, "I guess we'd better start figuring out how to be a family." Ruth looked at her children, Elijah and Patience and Ezra and the twins and little Mercy, all watching with wide eyes and trembling smiles. "I think," she said, "we already are." The week after the wedding was the strangest of Ruth's life. She woke each morning in a cabin that wasn't hers, beside a man she'd known for less than a fortnight, surrounded by children who kept looking at her like they were waiting for the other shoe to drop. "Mama." Mercy's voice pulled her from sleep. Dawn light filtered through the window. Silas's side of the bed was already cold. "What is it, baby Mill?" "Mr. Cobb." Mercy caught herself. "I mean Pa. He's making breakfast again." Pa. The word hit Ruth like a punch to the chest. Mercy had started using it 3 days ago, and each time it felt like a small miracle and a betrayal all at once. "I'll be right there." She found Silas at the stove, flipping flapjacks with the ease of long practice. The children sat around the table, Elijah still watchful, Patience helping Ezra with his medicine, the twins arguing about something, Mercy chattering at Silas about a dream she'd had. Normal. It looked almost normal. "Morning." Silas glanced over his shoulder. "Coffee's hot." "Thank you." "Sleep all right?" "Fine." It was a lie. She'd lain awake half the night listening to his breathing, wondering what she'd done. Wondering if she'd saved her children or doomed them all to a different kind of prison. "Ruth." She looked up. Silas had set down the spatula. His eyes were gentle but direct. "You've got that look again." "What look?" "The one that says you're about to bolt." Ruth's cheeks flushed. "I'm not going to bolt." "I know." He picked up the spatula again. "But you're thinking about it." She didn't deny it. The children ate in shifts, the twins first, then Mercy, then Ezra, who was gaining strength every day, but still tired easily. Patience helped clean up while Elijah headed outside to chop wood. The rhythm of it was familiar, yet foreign, like wearing someone else's clothes. "Can we talk?" Silas asked when the kitchen had cleared. "About what?" "About what happens next." Ruth's stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" "I mean—" He ran a hand through his hair. "This was supposed to be a convenience, a way to protect the children, but it's been a week and we haven't—" He stopped. Ruth saw the uncertainty in his face, the fear he was trying to hide. "We haven't what? We haven't talked about what this actually is." Ruth set down her coffee cup. Her hands were shaking. "What do you want it to be?" "I asked you first." "That's not fair." "Maybe not." He moved closer. Not touching her, but close enough that she could feel his warmth. "But I need to know, Ruth, because I can't keep sleeping next to you and pretending I don't feel something." Her breath caught. "Silas, I know it's too fast. I know we barely know each other. I know this whole thing is backwards and crazy and nothing like how it's supposed to work." His voice dropped. "But I look at you and I see a future I didn't think I'd ever have again. And I need to know if you see it too, or if I'm just a fool chasing something that isn't there." Ruth looked at this man, her husband legally, if not yet in any way that mattered. She saw the hope in his eyes, the fear of rejection, the desperate longing for connection that she recognized because she felt it too. "I don't know what I see," she said honestly. "I buried my daughter a week ago. I buried my first husband 6 months ago. My heart is—" She pressed a hand to her chest. "It's not whole, Silas. It might never be whole again." "I'm not asking for whole." "What are you asking for?" "A chance." He reached out slowly and took her hand. "Just a chance to earn whatever you've got left to give." Ruth felt tears burn in her eyes. "What if it's not enough? Let me worry about that. Silas?" "Mama." Elijah's voice, sharp and urgent from outside. Ruth was on her feet before she knew she'd moved. She hit the porch, running Silas right behind her. Elijah stood at the edge of the property, axe in hand, staring down the mountain road. A rider was approaching, not Josiah's fancy carriage this time, but a single horse moving fast. "Who is it?" Ruth demanded. "Don't know." Elijah's grip tightened on the axe. "But they're wearing a badge." Ruth's blood went cold. The rider pulled up in a spray of snow. A woman, Ruth realized with surprise. Young, maybe 25, with sharp eyes and a tin star pinned to her coat. "Mrs. Cobb?" "Yes." "I'm Deputy Sarah Cole from Silver Creek." She dismounted, reaching into her saddlebag. "I have a letter for you. From Denver." Ruth's hands trembled as she took the envelope. The seal was official, some kind of government office. Her fingers fumbled with the paper. "What does it say?" Silas was at her shoulder. Ruth read the words. Read them again. Read them a third time because they couldn't possibly mean what she thought they meant. "It's from Judge Morrison." Her voice came out strange, hollow. "He's overturned his own ruling." "What?" "Someone sent him evidence, letters, testimony from witnesses in Pennsylvania who knew Josiah before he came west." Ruth looked up, her eyes wide. "They prove he falsified his petition, forged signatures, bribed the original witnesses." "How is that possible?" Silas took the letter, scanning it quickly. We don't have any evidence." "I don't know." Ruth turned to the deputy. "Who sent this? Who provided the evidence?" Deputy Cole shrugged. "Letter came through official channels. Judge said to deliver it personally. Make sure you understood what it meant." "And what does it mean?" "Means Josiah Whitfield's custody claim is null and void. Means any future attempts to remove your children will be treated as kidnapping." The deputy almost smiled. "Means you're free, Mrs. Cobb, for good." Ruth's legs gave out. She would have hit the ground if Silas hadn't caught her again, always catching her when she fell. "Easy," he murmured. "I've got you." "I don't understand." Ruth clutched the letter like a lifeline. "I made up the evidence. I bluffed. There were no letters." "There were letters." A new voice from the direction of the cabin. Ruth turned. Patience stood in the doorway, her face pale but determined. "What did you say?" "There were letters, Mama." Patience stepped forward, her hands clasped in front of her, like she was preparing for punishment. "Papa kept them. In a box under the floor of the soddy. He showed me once when I was little, made me promise not to tell anyone." Ruth's heart stopped. "What?" "He said." Patience's voice wavered. "He said if anything ever happened to him, I should find the letters and use them. He said they were proof of what Uncle Josiah really was. He said they'd keep us safe." "But how did they get to Denver?" "I sent them." Patience lifted her chin. "The day before we left the soddy. While you were packing, I dug them up. Wrote a letter explaining everything. Paid a man in town to deliver it to the judge." Ruth stared at her daughter. 11 years old. 11 years old, and she'd saved them all. "You never said anything?" I wasn't sure it would work." Patience's composure cracked. Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I didn't want to give you hope, and then have it be nothing, like everything else." Ruth crossed the distance between them and pulled her daughter into her arms. "You brilliant, wonderful girl." Her voice broke. "You saved us. You saved all of us." Patience sobbed against her shoulder, not the careful, controlled tears she usually allowed herself, but the deep, wrenching cries of a child who'd been carrying too much for too long. "I miss him, Mama. I miss Papa. I know he was sick. I know he couldn't, but I miss him." "I know, baby. I miss him too." They held each other while the snow fell, and the deputy waited, and Silas stood guard like he'd been doing it all his life. Finally, Ruth pulled back, wiped her daughter's face with her sleeve. "We're going to be okay now," she said. "For real this time. Promise? Promise." The news traveled fast. Within 2 days, everyone in Silver Creek knew that Reverend Josiah Whitfield had been exposed as a fraud. Within a week, the Denver papers had picked up the story. By the end of the month, Josiah had fled back east, his reputation in tatters, his congregation scattered, his power completely broken. Ruth didn't celebrate, couldn't bring herself to feel anything but relief. "You should be happy." Silas found her on the porch one evening staring at the sunset. "He's gone. He can't hurt you anymore." "I know. But it doesn't bring Grace back." Ruth's voice was quiet. "It doesn't bring William back. It doesn't undo any of the pain." Silas sat beside her, not touching but close. "No," he agreed. "It doesn't. So what's the point of any of it? We fight and we struggle and we lose people anyway. What's the point? The point is them." Silas nodded toward the cabin where the sounds of the children drifted through the window. Elijah's low voice, Patience's laughter, the twins arguing, Mercy's endless questions, Ezra's improving cough. "They're the point, Ruth. They're alive. They're safe. They're going to grow up and have lives of their own because you didn't give up. Because you fought for them even when you had nothing left. I didn't do it alone. No, but you did do it." He turned to face her. "That means something. It has to mean something." Ruth looked at him, at this man who'd walked into her life at the worst possible moment and somehow made it bearable. "I don't know how to love you," she said. The words came out before she could stop them. "I want to. I think I could. But I don't know how anymore." "Then we'll figure it out together." "What if we can't?" "Then at least we'll have tried." He took her hand. "I'm not asking for perfection, Ruth. I'm not asking for a fairy tale. I'm just asking for you to stay. To let me be your husband, in more than just name. To build something real out of this crazy thing we started. And if I can't give you children, I'm 34 years old, Silas. I've had 7 pregnancies. My body might not. I already have children." His voice was firm. 6 of them. Elijah and Patience and Ezra and Noah and Caleb and Mercy. They're mine now, Ruth. Legally and otherwise. I don't need more. You say that now. I'll say it forever. He squeezed her hand. Whatever happens, wherever this goes, those children are my family. You're my family. And I'm not going anywhere. Ruth felt something crack open inside her. Not the sharp, painful break of loss, something softer, warmer, like ice melting in spring. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay what?" "Okay, I'll try." She leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. "I'll try to love you the way you deserve. That's all I'm asking." They sat together as the sun went down, and for the first time in months, Ruth felt something that might have been peace. 2 weeks later, Elijah asked to speak with Silas alone. Ruth watched them walk toward the barn, her heart in her throat. She knew what was coming. She'd seen the way Elijah had been watching Silas, the suspicion slowly giving way to something else, something like hope. What do you think they're talking about? Patience appeared beside her. I think Elijah is deciding whether to let himself have a father again. That's good, isn't it? I hope so. They waited. The minutes stretched into half an hour. Ruth was about to go after them when the barn door opened. Elijah came out first. His eyes were red, but his face was calm. Behind him, Silas looked like he'd been punched in the gut, but in a good way, if that was possible. Well, Ruth asked as Elijah approached. Her son stopped in front of her. 13 years old, but in that moment he looked about 6. I asked him if I could call him Pa. Ruth's breath caught. And, he said, Elijah's voice broke. He said he'd be honored. Ruth pulled her son into her arms, held him while he cried, really cried for the first time since William died. I'm not replacing Papa, Elijah mumbled against her shoulder. I told him that. I said Papa will always be my father, but you need someone, Ruth finished. Someone to teach you, someone to guide you, someone to catch you when you fall. Elijah nodded. That's not betrayal, baby. That's growth. Ruth pulled back, cupping his face in her hands. Your papa would want this for you. He'd want you to have someone in your corner. You think so? I know so. Elijah wiped his eyes with his sleeve, straightened his shoulders, and for the first time in months, Ruth saw the boy he used to be. Not the little soldier, not the man of the house, just her son. I'm going to help Pa with the horses, he said. He's teaching me to shoe them. Pa. The word came out naturally easily, like it had always been there. Ruth watched him walk back to the barn, watched Silas clap him on the shoulder and lead him inside, watched her old life and her new life blend together into something she hadn't dared to hope for. Mama, Mercy tugged at her skirt. Why are you crying? Because I'm happy, baby. Crying means sad. Not always. Ruth scooped her daughter up, holding her close. Sometimes crying means everything is finally okay. Spring came slowly to the mountains. The snow melted in patches, revealing brown grass and frozen mud. The creek behind the cabin began to flow again, its music filling the air. Birds returned, first a few, then dozens, their songs announcing the end of the longest winter Ruth had ever endured. She stood on the porch one morning watching Silas teach the twins to fish in the creek. They were terrible at it, splashing more than casting, scaring every fish for miles, but they were laughing. All 3 of them laughing like nothing in the world could touch them. You're staring. Ruth jumped. Patience had appeared beside her, silent as always. I'm watching. Same thing. Patience leaned against the porch rail. He's good with them. He's good with all of you. I know. Patience was quiet for a moment. Mama, can I ask you something? Always. Do you love him? The question caught Ruth off guard. She'd been asking herself the same thing for weeks, turning it over in her mind like a stone she couldn't quite identify. I think so, she said finally. I think I'm starting to. Starting to isn't the same as yes. No, it isn't. Ruth looked at her daughter. But it's closer than I was a month ago, or a week ago. Every day it gets a little more real. Is that enough? I don't know. Ruth took a breath. I loved your father. Really loved him with everything I had. And it still wasn't enough to save him. Love doesn't guarantee anything, Patience. It just makes the journey worth taking. Patience considered this. That's sad. Is it? And beautiful. Patience almost smiled. Like most true things. Ruth pulled her daughter close. When did you get so wise? I had a good teacher. The letter from Pennsylvania arrived on the first day of April. Ruth didn't recognize the handwriting. The return address was a law office in Philadelphia. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Dear Mrs. Cobb, It is my duty to inform you that Josiah Whitfield passed away on March 15th of this year. He was found in his room at a boarding house having suffered an apparent apoplexy. As his nearest surviving relatives, your children are named in his will as beneficiaries of his estate, which includes property valued at approximately $3,000 and various personal effects. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience to discuss the transfer of these assets. Ruth read the letter 3 times. Then she sat down hard on the porch steps. Ruth? Silas was at her side in an instant. What is it? What's wrong? She handed him the letter, watched his face as he read. He's dead, Silas said slowly. Josiah is dead. Yes. And he left everything to the children. Yes. Silas set down the letter. How do you feel? Ruth considered the question. She'd expected to feel something relief maybe, or satisfaction, or even grief for the man her husband's brother might have been if life had treated him differently. Instead, she felt nothing, just emptiness where the fear used to live. I don't know, she admitted. I spent so long being afraid of him. Now he's gone, and I don't know what to do with all that space. Fill it with something better. Like what? Silas took her hand. Like hope, like peace, like the life you're building here with me and the children. Ruth looked at him, at his steady eyes, his patient face, his hands that had carried her when she couldn't stand, dug her daughter's grave, when she couldn't finish, held her through the darkest nights of her life. I love you, she said. The words came out before she could stop them, before she could qualify or explain or take them back. Silas went still. Ruth, I love you. Stronger now, certain. I didn't want to. I was afraid to. But I do. I love you, Silas Cobb. And I'm done being afraid. He kissed her. Not the gentle, tentative kisses they'd shared since the wedding. This was something else, deep and desperate, and full of all the words neither of them had been able to say. When they finally broke apart, Ruth was crying. So was Silas. I love you too, he said roughly. I've loved you since the moment I saw you in that snow. I just didn't know how to tell you. You didn't have to tell me. Ruth touched his face. You showed me. Every day, in everything you did, you showed me. So what now? Ruth looked out at her children, their children. Elijah, helping Ezra cast a fishing line. Patience reading to Mercy on the porch. The twins wrestling in the muddy grass covered head to toe in spring dirt. Now, she said, we live. That night, Ruth visited Grace's grave. They'd moved her in the spring thaw, brought her up the mountain to rest beside Eleanor and the son Silas had never held. 3 small graves in a row marked with simple stones surrounded by wildflowers that were just beginning to bloom. Ruth knelt in the soft earth, touched the cold stone that bore her daughter's name. I'm happy, baby, she whispered. For the first time in so long, I'm really happy. And I wanted you to know that. The wind whispered through the trees. Ruth could almost hear her daughter's laugh in it, that bright bubbling sound that used to fill the soddy on good days. I'll never stop missing you. None of us will. But I think... Her voice broke. I think you'd want us to keep going. To find joy again. To live the life you didn't get to have. She placed a small bundle of wildflowers on the grave, stood slowly, her knees aching from the cold ground. Goodbye, Grace. I'll come back soon. She walked back to the cabin, where light spilled from the windows and voices drifted on the evening air. Her family. Her home. Her second chance at everything she'd thought she'd lost forever. Silas met her at the door. You okay? Yeah. Ruth took his hand. I am now. They went inside together, closing the door on the darkness, stepping into the warmth. Summer arrived like a gift. Ruth woke to birdsong and warmth, to the sound of her children's voices drifting through the open window. Silas's side of the bed was empty. He'd been up since dawn as always, but his warmth still lingered in the sheets. She pressed her hand to her stomach, counted the days again, counted them a third time just to be sure. 6 weeks late. Ruth, Silas's voice from the kitchen. You coming down? In a minute. She dressed slowly, her mind racing. It wasn't possible. She'd told herself it wasn't possible. 34 years old, 7 pregnancies, a body that had been through too much. The odds were impossible, but bodies didn't care about odds. Mama. Mercy burst through the bedroom door without knocking. Pa says breakfast is ready, and if you don't come now, the twins will eat everything. I'm coming, baby. Are you sick? You look funny. I'm fine. Ruth smoothed her daughter's hair. Just tired. You're always tired lately. Mercy frowned. Pa says you need to rest more. Pa worries too much. Pa says that's his job. Ruth laughed despite herself. When did you get so smart? I was born this way. Mercy grabbed her hand. Come on, Mama. I'm hungry. They went down together. The kitchen was chaos, the twins fighting over the last biscuit, Elijah trying to separate them. Patience, reading at the table, while ignoring the mayhem. Ezra asking Silas questions about the horses. Normal, loud, alive. Ruth stood in the doorway and watched them. Her family, her second chance. You okay? Silas appeared at her elbow. You've got that look again. What look? The one where you're thinking too hard about something. Ruth hesitated. She should tell him. He deserved to know. But she wasn't sure yet, wasn't sure her body wasn't playing tricks on her, wasn't sure she could handle his hope if she was wrong. I'm fine, she said. Just taking it in. Silas studied her face. She could see him weighing her words, deciding whether to push. All right, he said finally. But if something's bothering you, I'll tell you, I promise. He kissed her forehead and went back to the stove. Ruth sat down at the table, her hand drifting unconsciously to her stomach. 6 weeks. It could be nothing. It could be everything. She'd know soon enough. The letter arrived 3 days later. Ruth saw the rider coming up the mountain road and felt her stomach drop. Letters never brought good news. Not in her experience. Who is it? Silas was beside her in an instant, his hand resting on the small of her back. Don't know. They waited together as the rider approached. A young man, barely 20, wearing the uniform of the Postal Service. Mrs. Cobb. Mrs. Ruth Cobb. Yes. He handed over a thick envelope. From the law office in Philadelphia. They said it was urgent. Ruth's hands trembled as she took it. Josiah's estate. She'd almost forgotten about it in the weeks since his death. Thank you. The rider tipped his hat and rode away. What is it? Silas asked. Ruth opened the envelope. Inside were documents, pages and pages of legal language she didn't understand, but at the top in plain English was a summary. Her children had inherited everything. The house in Philadelphia, the church properties, the bank accounts, all of it worth nearly $10,000. Ruth. Silas was watching her face. What does it say? She handed him the papers, watched his expression change as he read. $10,000, he said slowly. That's a fortune. It's more than I'll make in a lifetime. Ruth's legs went weak. She sat down on the porch steps, the documents clutched in her hands. I don't want it. What? I don't want his money. Her voice was fierce. I don't want anything from him. He tried to take my children. He made our lives hell. I don't want for Ruth. Silas crouched in front of her. This isn't about him. This is about them. He nodded toward the cabin where the sounds of the children drifted through the open door. This money could send Elijah to school, could give Patience the education she deserves, could make sure Ezra never wants for medicine again. His voice softened. It could give them chances we never had. Ruth's eyes burned. It feels like blood money. Maybe it is. Silas took her hands. But blood money spends the same as any other kind. And those children didn't do anything wrong. They shouldn't have to suffer because their uncle was a monster. He was their family. So am I. So are you. Silas held her gaze. Family isn't about blood, Ruth. It's about who shows up, who stays, who loves you even when it's hard. Ruth looked at him. At his steady eyes, his patient face, his hands holding hers like she was something precious. What do you think we should do? I think we should take the money, put it in a trust for the children, use it to build them a future. He paused. And then, never speak Josiah Whitfield's name again. Ruth considered this. It made sense. Practical, logical, fair. Everything Silas always was. All right, she said finally. For them. For them. 2 weeks later, Ruth told Silas about the baby. She hadn't planned it, hadn't rehearsed the words or chosen the perfect moment. She was washing dishes after dinner, thinking about nothing in particular, when he came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. His hands rested on her stomach, and Ruth heard herself say, "I'm pregnant." Silas went still. What? I'm pregnant. She turned to face him. I wasn't sure at first. I thought I was too old that my body couldn't, but I saw Doc Mercer yesterday, and he confirmed it. Silas stared at her. His face was blank, unreadable. Say something, Ruth whispered. I don't. His voice broke. Ruth, are you sure? I'm sure. But you said you told me. I know what I told you. I was wrong. She took his hands, placed them on her still flat stomach. There's a baby in there, Silas. Our baby. Yours and mine. Something cracked open in his face. Something raw and vulnerable and terrified. I can't. He pulled away, turned his back to her. I can't do this again. Silas, you don't understand. His voice was ragged. Eleanor died giving birth. Our son died. I held them both and watched the life drain out of them, and there was nothing I could do. Ruth's heart shattered. That won't happen to me. You don't know that. No, I don't. She moved toward him, slowly, carefully. But I've had 7 children, Silas. 7 pregnancies, 7 births. My body knows how to do this. So did Eleanor's. The words hung in the air. Ruth saw his shoulders shaking, saw the grief he'd carried for 7 years rising up to swallow him whole. She wrapped her arms around him from behind, pressed her face to his back. I'm scared too, she admitted. I'm terrified, but I'm also happy. For the first time in so long, I'm happy about something that hasn't happened yet. I'm hoping for something instead of just surviving something. What if I lose you? What if you don't? Silas turned to face her. His eyes were wet, his face twisted with fear and love, and something else. Something that looked like the beginning of hope. I can't go through that again, Ruth. I can't bury another wife, another child. Then don't. She cupped his face in her hands. Don't bury me. Help me live. Help me bring this baby into the world. Help me raise it alongside the 6 we already have. 7. What? We have 7 children. His voice was fierce. Grace is still ours. She'll always be ours. Ruth's eyes overflowed. 8 then. We're going to have 8. Silas pulled her into his arms, held her so tight she could barely breathe. I'm scared, he whispered against her hair. I know. I love you so much it hurts. I know that too. Promise me you'll be careful. Promise me you'll rest. Promise me. I promise. She pulled back, meeting his eyes. I promise I'll do everything I can to stay with you, to raise this baby together, to grow old and gray and annoying right here in this cabin. He laughed. It came out broken wet, but it was a laugh. Annoying. I'm told I can be difficult. You never. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. We're having a baby. We're having a baby. How am I supposed to tell the children? Ruth smiled. I was hoping you'd figure that out. Me? Why me? Because you're the one who wanted to be their father. Silas groaned, but he was smiling, really smiling for the first time since she'd told him. Fine, he said, but you're doing the explaining when they ask where babies come from. Deal. They told the children that night. Ruth had expected questions, excitement, maybe some confusion from the younger ones. What she hadn't expected was tears, from Elijah. Her 13-year-old son, almost 14, now stood in the middle of the cabin with tears streaming down his face, unable to speak. Elijah. Ruth reached for him. What's wrong? I thought you'd be happy. I am happy. His voice came out strangled. I never thought... He couldn't finish. Ruth pulled him into her arms, and he sobbed against her shoulder like he had when he was small. I thought we were done having good things happen, he managed. I thought after Grace, after Papa, I thought that was it. We used up all our luck. Oh, baby. Ruth held him tighter. That's not how it works. Good things don't run out. They just take longer to find sometimes. But what if something goes wrong? What if the baby? Then we'll handle it together, like we've handled everything else. She pulled back, cupping his face. But I need you to believe that good things can happen, Elijah. I need you to hope again. Can you do that for me? He wiped his eyes, nodded slowly. I can try. That's all I'm asking, Mercy interrupted before the moment could go on too long. Does this mean I'm not the baby anymore? Ruth laughed. You'll always be my baby, Mercy. But there's going to be a new baby, a real baby. Yes. Mercy considered this. Can I help name it? We'll see. I want to name it Princess Buttercup. Absolutely not. But Mama. Ruth looked around at her family, at Elijah wiping his tears, at Patience already planning how to help, at Ezra asking medical questions Ruth couldn't answer, at the twins fighting over whether they wanted a brother or a sister, at Mercy lobbying hard for Princess Buttercup, at Silas standing in the corner watching it all with an expression of terrified joy. This was her life now, loud and chaotic and full of love. She wouldn't trade it for anything. The pregnancy was easier than Ruth expected. Doc Mercer came up the mountain once a month to check on her. Each time he proclaimed her healthy, strong, built for this. Each time Silas hovered in the corner asking questions until the doctor threatened to ban him from the room. He's worse than any first-time father I've seen, Doc Mercer told Ruth after one visit. And this is your 8th child. He lost his first wife in childbirth. Can you blame him? The doctor's expression softened. No, I suppose I can't. The months passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. The children helped get the cabin ready, Elijah building a cradle under Silas's supervision. Patience sewing tiny clothes, the twins collecting soft things to line the baby's bed. Even Mercy contributed drawing pictures to hang in the nursery corner. This one's the baby, she explained, pointing to a blob of color. And this one's me, and this one's Princess Buttercup. I thought we weren't naming the baby Princess Buttercup. This is a different Princess Buttercup. This is the baby's imaginary friend. Ruth didn't have the energy to argue. The nights were harder. Silas barely slept, waking at every sound, checking on Ruth constantly. She'd find him sitting up in bed, watching her breathe, his face tight with worry. You need to rest, she told him one night, after catching him staring at her for the 3rd time. I'm fine. You're not fine. You're exhausted. I'm scared. The admission came out rough. Every time I close my eyes, I see Eleanor. I see the blood. I see... Ruth took his hand. That's not going to happen. You don't know that. No. But I know something you don't. What? I know that worrying won't change anything. If something's going to go wrong, it'll go wrong whether you're watching or not. But if you destroy yourself with fear, you won't be any good to me or the baby or anyone." Silas was quiet for a long moment. "When did you get so wise?" "I had 7 children. You learn things." He almost smiled. 8. 8. She squeezed his hand. "Now lie down, close your eyes, and trust me to wake you if something happens." "Ruth, trust me." He lay down. She curled against him, her swollen belly pressing into his back. "I love you," he murmured. "I love you too. Now sleep." He did, and so did she. The baby came in January, a full year since Ruth had knelt in the snow, ready to let the cold take her. A year since Silas had ridden out of a blizzard and changed everything. The labor started at dawn. By noon, Ruth was certain something was wrong. "It's taking too long." She gripped Silas's hand as another contraction tore through her. "It wasn't like this with the others." "Every birth is different." Doc Mercer's voice was calm, but Ruth could see the concern in his eyes. "The baby's turned the wrong way. I'm going to try to—" Ruth screamed. The pain was unlike anything she'd experienced, sharp and tearing and wrong. "Ruth." Silas was at her side, his face white. "Ruth, talk to me." "Something's wrong." She could barely get the words out. "I need everyone out." Doc Mercer's voice was sharp. "Everyone except Mrs. Cobb, now." "I'm not leaving her." "Mr. Cobb." "I said I'm not leaving her." Silas's voice broke. "I left Eleanor. I went outside when the doctor told me to, and when I came back she was... This isn't Eleanor." Ruth grabbed his face with both hands, forcing him to look at her. "This is me. I'm still here. I'm still fighting." "Ruth, stay if you have to, but don't fall apart. I need you strong." Another contraction. Ruth felt something shift inside her, a movement, a change. "The baby's turning." Doc Mercer's voice was urgent. "Push now, Ruth. Push with everything you have." She pushed, screamed, pushed again. And then a cry, small and thin and perfect. "It's a girl." Doc Mercer held up the baby, red and squalling. "A healthy baby girl." Ruth sobbed, reached for her daughter, held that tiny miraculous life against her chest. "She's beautiful." Silas's voice was wrecked. Tears streamed down his face. "Ruth, she's so beautiful." "She looks like you." "No." He touched the baby's face with one trembling finger. "She looks like hope." They named her Eleanor Grace, for the wife Silas had lost, for the daughter Ruth had buried, for the past and the future and everything in between. "Are you sure?" Silas had asked when Ruth suggested it. "I don't want to. I'm sure." Ruth had taken his hand. "They're part of our story, Silas, both of them. We wouldn't be here without them. This baby is a new beginning, but that doesn't mean we have to forget how we got here." Eleanor Grace, Ellie for short. The other children adored her. Elijah held her like she was made of glass. Patience sang her to sleep every night. The twins fought over who got to make her laugh. Ezra read to her from his favorite books. Mercy declared herself Ellie's official best friend and took the job very seriously. And Silas was transformed. Ruth watched him hold their daughter for hours at a time, murmuring words she couldn't hear, making promises she could only imagine. The fear never fully left his eyes, but something else lived there now too, something that looked like peace. "You're staring," he said one evening, catching her gaze. "I'm watching." "Same thing." "Maybe." She moved closer, resting her head on his shoulder. "I was thinking about how far we've come." "Far from what?" "From that day in the snow, when I was ready to give up." Silas was quiet for a moment. "I think about that day a lot." "So do I." "I almost didn't stop. Did you know that—" Ruth's breath caught. What? I saw you from the road, saw you kneeling there with the snow coming down, and my first thought was to keep riding, mind my own business, stay safe in my isolation. His voice roughened. I'm so glad I didn't. So am I. Ellie stirred in his arms, making soft sounds. Silas adjusted his hold, his movements gentle and sure. I used to think I was cursed, he said quietly. After Eleanor died, after my son, I thought God had marked me for suffering, and anyone who got close to me would suffer too. And now I think maybe I was being saved, kept alone until the right person came along, until you came along. Ruth's eyes burned. That's a nice way to look at it. It's the only way I can look at it. He turned to face her. Because the alternative is believing that everything that happened to Eleanor, my son William Grace, all of it was just random cruelty. And I can't believe that, Ruth. I can't believe we suffered that much for nothing. Maybe it wasn't for nothing. Ruth touched his face. Maybe it was all leading us here, to each other, to this family, to this moment. Do you believe that? Ruth thought about it. About the girl she'd been when she married William, full of hope and dreams. About the woman she'd become after his death, broken and desperate. About the stranger who'd ridden out of a blizzard and refused to let her give up. I believe, she said slowly, that we're here, that we're alive, that we love each other and our children and this life we've built. And maybe that's enough. Maybe we don't have to understand why things happened the way they did. Maybe we just have to be grateful that they led us here. Silas kissed her, soft and slow, with Ellie nestled between them. I am grateful, he murmured against her lips. Every day I'm grateful. So am I. 2 years later, Ruth stood on the porch of their cabin and watched her family. Elijah, 16, now helping Silas repair the fence. Patience, almost 14, teaching Mercy to read. Ezra and the twins chasing each other through the meadow, their laughter carrying on the wind. And Ellie toddling across the grass with her arms outstretched, trying to catch butterflies she couldn't quite reach. 8 children, 8 miracles, and 1 man who had made it all possible. You're thinking again. Silas had appeared beside her, his work gloves tucked in his belt. Always. What about this time? Ruth leaned into him. About how different my life is now. How different I am. Different good or different bad. Different healed. She looked up at him. I used to feel like I was drowning, like every day was just survival, getting through one moment to reach the next. Now I feel like I'm actually living, like I have a future instead of just a past. You do have a future. Silas wrapped his arm around her. We all do, because you didn't give up. Neither did you. I almost did. You saved me as much as I saved you. Ruth thought about that. About the broken man who'd lived alone on this mountain for 7 years, talking to ghosts because he couldn't face the living. About the strength it had taken for him to stop that day, to reach out, to risk everything on a widow and her children. We saved each other, she said finally. That's how it works, isn't it? Nobody makes it alone. Nobody should have to. Ellie came running toward them, her chubby legs pumping, her face alight with joy. Ruth caught her, swung her up, held her close. Mama? Mama, I saw a butterfly. Did you catch it? No, it flew away. Ellie's face fell for a moment, then brightened. But maybe tomorrow I'll catch it. Maybe you will. Ruth set her daughter down and watched her run off again, already chasing the next beautiful thing. That was life, wasn't it? Chasing beautiful things, catching some, losing others. But always, always hoping for tomorrow. I love you. The words came out before Ruth could stop them. Silas smiled. I know. I mean it, more than I can say. I know that too. He took her hand. I love you back, Ruth Cobb. Today. Tomorrow. Every day until they put me in the ground next to Eleanor and our boy. Don't talk about dying. I'm not talking about dying. I'm talking about living. He squeezed her fingers. I'm talking about spending every minute I have left with you and these children. I'm talking about building something that lasts, something that matters. You think we have that? Something that lasts. Silas looked out at their family, at the children they'd raised together, some born to them, some chosen, all loved. At the home they'd built with their own hands. At the life they'd carved out of wilderness and heartbreak. Yeah, he said quietly. I think we do. Ruth followed his gaze. She saw Elijah laugh at something Patience said, saw the twins tackle Ezra into a pile of leaves, saw Mercy spin in circles with her arms outstretched, saw Ellie fall down, get up, and keep running. She thought about Grace buried on the hill with the wildflowers, about William who had loved her the best he could, about Eleanor and the son who never drew breath, about all the losses that had led them here to this moment to each other. Do you ever wonder what would have happened, she asked, if you hadn't stopped that day, sometimes? What do you think? Silas was quiet for a long moment. I think you would have gotten up, he said finally. Maybe not that day, maybe not the next, but eventually, because that's who you are, Ruth. You're someone who gets up, someone who keeps going, someone who refuses to let the world beat her. I was ready to give up, but you didn't. He turned to face her fully. You were on your knees in that snow with nothing left to give, and you still got up when I called. You still fought. You still chose to live. Ruth felt tears prick her eyes. I chose because you gave me a reason to. No. Silas shook his head. You chose because you wanted to. Because somewhere deep down you still believed things could get better. I just gave you something to hold on to while you climbed out of the dark. He cupped her face in his hands. You're the strongest person I've ever known, Ruth Ellen Cobb. Don't ever let anyone tell you different. Don't ever forget what you survived and what you built. Ruth covered his hands with her own. I won't, she promised. Not ever. They stood together on the porch of their cabin watching their children play in the summer sun. Two broken people who had found each other in a blizzard. Two wounded hearts that had learned to beat as one. Behind them, the mountains rose in the distance. Ahead of them, the future stretched out, uncertain, yes, but full of possibility, full of hope. Ruth had buried a daughter, a husband, and the woman she used to be. But she'd also found a family, a love, and a home. And standing there with Silas's hands on her face and her children's laughter in her ears, Ruth Ellen Cobb knew one thing for certain. She was never going to kneel in the snow again. She was going to stand tall, hold tight to the people she loved, and face whatever came next. Not alone, never alone again, together.